You think about what you've accomplished. You came from very modest circumstances. You didn't come from a wealthy family.
Well, modest is not the word.
Well, I was trying to be polite.
I mean, I was actually poor. And you know, a lot of the girls at my school, actually all the girls from my school are poor. And I was saying to them just recently, I was just in South Africa for a graduation, you know, you all are come from the same circumstances. You are poor. And one of the girls raised her hand and said, I don't like using that word. I go, well, if you're not poor, then you should excuse yourself, because that's why I'm paying for you, because you're in this school. So if you're not, but you don't like the choice of the word. So I don't have a problem with the word. I don't have any shame about it. I think, you know, probably earlier in my life or career, the word would have bothered me. But it was, I was poor. No running water, David, or electricity, living with an outhouse. Okay, that's poor.
But you were also shuttled between your mother, your father, your grandmother, and so forth. It's very disconcerting to be shuttled back and forth. So at what point did you realize that you had some skills that were maybe going to enable you to rise up? When you were young, you had some pretty good skills as an orator.
Well, I think kindergarten, I kind of felt it. I was...
Right. Did other people agree with you then that you were going to be special?
No, this is my kindergarten story. Listen, my grandmother had taught me, so I'm raised on this little acre. I used to call it a farm. Then I went back and saw it. It wasn't a farm. Right. It was an acre. Right. And I remember my grandmother taught me how to read. So I grew up learning to read, and I read Bible verses. I grew up reading. So by the time I was 6 and got shuttled to Milwaukee, and because my birthday came in the wrong time, I hadn't. The grace for me is that I didn't spend a day in a segregated school. So I did not have one moment of ever being conditioned to believe that I was less than anybody. So when I walked into my first kindergarten class, first time I'd ever seen little white children that my grandmother didn't, you know, work for. And everybody was doing their ABC things. And I was like, why are the children doing the ABCs? So I wrote my kindergarten teacher, Miss New, a letter. And I said, dear Miss New, I do not belong here.
Right. So,
because I know a lot of big words. And then I proceeded to write every big word I knew. Anybody who reads the Bible here, it was Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, and then I put an elephant and hippopotamus just because there were some more big words. So I kind of I saw the impression that made on Miss New.
Speaking of big words in Bible, your first name came from a biblical source, but it was supposed to be
Orpah.
Orpah. How did it get to be Oprah?
Misspelled the first day I went to school, and it stayed that way. So it's on my birth certificate as Orpah.
But it's, you know, very famous. Very few people in the world are known by one name. There's Oprah, there's Elvis, there's Jesus. Very few people. But I mean,
there are a few others.
But suppose your name was just Mary or Jane.
It wouldn't have worked.
It wouldn't have worked. Okay.
And I remember once being in Baltimore, and I had a news director who, when I first came to work in Baltimore, had said to me, we're going to have to do something about that name. We need to do something about that because nobody's going to remember it or know how to pronounce it. And up until that time, David, I'd always wanted to have a name like everybody else's. So it was only when my bosses told me that, you know, I was going to I needed to think about changing it, and they mentioned, you know, Susie, because Susie's friendly, that nobody can say Susie and not say Susie Winfrey. Eyewitness News, that's a friendly thing. And it's only when I was challenged with the idea of changing it that I thought, no, I'm going to keep my name. So when I started in Baltimore, your mother can tell you this because she was there, they started me with a campaign called What is an Oprah? Trying to explain to people how to pronounce the name